The wind cut across the high cliffs like a cold blade, carrying the scent of salt from the restless sea below. On the horizon, the castle of King Alaric rose from jagged rocks, its towers dark against the gray sky. Stories of the king's cruelty and the shadow of a family curse were whispered far and wide. Yet here came Mara, sent by her own family as punishment. They called her a widowed woman, as if grief were a crime, and hoped the king's reputation would humble her. Mara's hands trembled slightly, not from fear of the castle but from the long road she had traveled. She had left behind a home that had never welcomed her grief and a family that saw her sorrow as shame. Her cloak, though tattered at the edges, was wrapped tightly around her slender frame, shielding her from the biting wind. Her eyes, a quiet gray, reflected both sorrow and a steady determination. She was weary, yet she carried herself with a quiet dignity that even the harshest eyes could not ignore. The castle gates loomed before her, massive iron and stone etched with symbols that seemed to shimmer in the dim light. The guards at the gate eyed her carefully, their expressions unreadable, but they made no move to stop her. Word of her arrival had spread, and whispers trailed her every step. "The widowed woman is here," the servants murmured. "The one they send to him as punishment." Inside, the castle breathed with shadows. Torches flickered along the stone walls, casting long, dancing shapes. The halls smelled of cold stone, wax, and a faint trace of herbs that no visitor could name. Mara followed the guide through the echoing corridors. Her steps, soft but measured. She felt eyes upon her, felt the quiet hum of magic that lingered in the walls like a secret. And then she saw him. King Alaric sat in the great hall, the air around him heavy and almost tangible with power. His dark hair fell in careless waves, and his eyes were sharp, almost piercing in their intensity. He was a man who had seen too much, whose trust had been betrayed countless times. Around him, the shadows seemed to cling, protective and watchful. Yet when he looked at Mara, there was something different, a flicker of curiosity, a trace of recognition, though neither knew why. Mara bowed respectfully, her voice steady despite the pounding of her heart. "Your Majesty, I am Mara, sent by my family." Alaric's gaze studied her, like one might examine a rare artifact. Careful, precise, and full of hidden questions. He noticed the way she carried herself, the quiet strength behind her grief, and the faint light in her eyes that no shadow could entirely dim. For a moment, the great hall seemed to hold its breath, the torches flickering, as if uncertain whether to shine or fade. "You are the widow they speak of," Alaric said finally, his voice deep, calm, and controlled. "They send you as punishment?" Mara's lips pressed together, but she did not flinch. "Yes, Your Majesty. It seems I have been judged unworthy at home. I only hope to serve where I am needed." Alaric's gaze softened slightly, though only a hint, a shadow of interest. He leaned back in his high-backed chair, studying her carefully. "Few arrive at my castle willingly, and fewer with dignity intact. We shall see whether you are as fragile as they claim." The servants muttered among themselves, some shaking their heads, others whispering, "She will break before the week ends." But Mara's eyes never left Alaric's. She sensed the storm in him, the grief, the isolation, the curse that seemed to haunt the very stones of the castle. And though fear lingered at the edge of her mind, she felt a strange pull, a sense that this king and this cursed castle were more than mere punishment. They were a test, a challenge, and perhaps, unknowingly, a kind of destiny. That night, Mara was shown to her quarters, a room modest yet warm, with a small window overlooking the cliffs. The moonlight spilled across the floor in silver streaks, touching the edge of her cloak. She sat quietly by the window, listening to the wind, letting the sound wash over her, and she thought of the life she had lost, the family that had betrayed her, and the unknown road ahead. She did not notice the shadow that lingered in the corridor outside her door, watching, studying, waiting. It was neither guard nor servant, yet it moved with purpose, slipping silently along the walls before vanishing into the castle's depths. The next day, Mara was summoned to the gardens. The castle gardens were strange, beautiful, and slightly unsettling. Twisting hedges grew taller than most men, flowers glowed faintly in unnatural colors, and the air held the scent of earth and rain mixed with something magical, something that made the hairs on her arms rise. Alaric met her there, standing beneath the twisted branches of an ancient tree, its roots curling like giant fingers into the soil. "Walk with me," he said. His voice carried authority, but also an unspoken invitation. Mara stepped lightly beside him, keeping her eyes forward, yet aware of every nuance in his movements. "Why am I here?" she asked softly. "Do you wish to test me? Or have they sent me as a joke?" Alaric's lips curved in a shadow of a smile, almost imperceptible. "Neither," he said. "I do not need to test you to see that you carry sorrow. But I will observe whether you are strong enough to walk within shadows and not be consumed by them." Mara's heart skipped. His words, though careful, held an unspoken challenge. She realized that the king's cruelty was not always in acts, but in the power he wielded with a mere glance, a single phrase. Yet she did not step back. She met his gaze steadily. Hours passed. Mara explored the castle under Alaric's silent scrutiny, walking through halls, examining the libraries filled with ancient books, the chambers filled with relics of the past, and the armory, where swords gleamed in muted light. Everywhere, she felt the weight of history, of curses, of a kingdom that demanded more than mere survival. At dusk, she returned to her quarters, exhausted yet alert. She felt the pull of the castle's magic more strongly now, a sense that the stones themselves remembered every betrayal, every heartbreak, every secret pact. And somewhere deep inside, she sensed that her arrival had awakened something, though she did not know what it was. Later, as the castle fell into silence, Mara heard a soft whisper, almost like a sigh. At first, she thought it was the wind, but the sound carried a tone that was too deliberate, too familiar. She followed it cautiously, her steps light and careful, until she reached a corridor where the shadows seemed to pulse, alive. The whispers came again, clearer this time, a soft voice saying her name, calling her forward. Fear prickled at her, yet she did not turn back. Something in the castle wanted her to understand, to see, to awaken. And in that moment, Mara realized that this punishment from her family had led her not to despair, but to a place where destiny and danger intertwined, where sorrow and hope could meet, and where a king who had long given up on love might find something he had only dared to dream of. And somewhere in the deepest shadows of the castle, King Alaric watched silently. For the first time in years, a flicker of something human, something hopeful, stirred within him. Mara was no ordinary woman. She was a spark in the darkness, and he could not look away. The wind howled outside, the moon disappeared behind clouds, and the castle seemed to shiver, as if aware of the change. Mara returned to her room, unaware that she had already begun to unravel the threads of a curse older than the walls themselves. And as she lay down, the whispers came once more, faint and urgent. The treasure you seek is not in gold, but in the heart that dares to love again. Mara closed her eyes, uncertain whether it was a dream or a warning, yet deep within, she felt the stirrings of courage, of curiosity, and of a bond that would not be denied. The castle was alive, the king was watching, and the journey that had begun as punishment had only just begun. The night deepened. Shadows gathered in corners, whispers echoed along corridors, and the castle waited, patient, knowing that the arrival of the widowed woman had awakened a story long held in silence. And somewhere, in the echo of her footsteps and the flicker of torchlight, Destiny leaned forward, watching, ready to claim its due. The next morning, the castle seemed different to Mara. The stone corridors no longer felt entirely cold. Sunlight streamed through high windows, casting golden lines on the floors, illuminating dust motes that danced like tiny spirits in the air. Yet even in the light, shadows lingered, curling in corners, moving where eyes could not see. Mara sensed that the castle itself was alive, watching her, waiting to reveal its secrets. King Alaric summoned her to the library, a vast chamber of ancient knowledge and dark wood. The shelves stretched impossibly high, and ladders moved as if by their own will. The air smelled of old parchment, wax, and faint incense. Alaric stood by the largest window, looking out over the cliffs where the sea met jagged rocks. But when he saw Mara enter, his gaze shifted, sharp and measuring. "Yesterday," he said, his voice quiet but firm, "you walked through my castle with courage. Few could do that." Without faltering, Mara inclined her head. "I have no desire to falter, Your Majesty. I only wish to find my place." Alaric's eyes lingered on her a moment longer than politeness required. He studied the set of her shoulders, the steadiness in her steps, the way she held her gaze. Most widows arrive broken or fearful. You carry something different. Something I do not understand." Mara felt a small warmth rise in her chest. She had expected disdain, mockery, or cold judgment, not curiosity or faint admiration. Yet she kept her voice calm. Perhaps strength is something learned in sorrow. Alaric said nothing further, but a subtle shift occurred in the air. Mara could feel it, a softening, a possibility of trust, though neither would name it aloud. As days passed, Mara began exploring more of the castle under Alaric's careful watch. She wandered through hidden corridors, secret staircases, and small rooms filled with relics that seemed to whisper their own histories. One evening, she discovered the castle gardens in the soft glow of twilight. The hedges were taller than men, their leaves twisting like fingers toward the sky. Flowers shimmered with faint colors she had never seen, and the fountains flowed with water that sparkled like liquid silver. Alaric appeared behind her without a sound. "The gardens are older than my family," he said. "Many try to change them, to make them tame. Few succeed. Fewer still understand them." Mara turned, meeting his gaze. "They are beautiful, in a way that feels alive, not controlled." Alaric's eyes narrowed slightly, though not in displeasure. "Yes, life often grows in places others fear to tread." They walked together among the twisting paths, speaking little, yet each step carried unspoken meaning. Mara sensed Alaric testing her not through cruelty, but through observation. Would she notice the small dangers? Would she respect the life hidden in shadows? Would she remain herself? Steady? Undaunted? She did. That night, the whispers returned. Mara followed them to a chamber she had never entered. A room lined with mirrors that reflected not only her image but fragments of memory. Flashes of Alaric as a boy, the tragic events that shaped him, the loss he had suffered. A single candle flickered on a table, illuminating a small, ornate box. When Mara opened it, she found letters written in a delicate hand, the words full of longing and heartbreak. She realized they were written by Alaric's lost love, the woman whose death had cast a shadow over the king's heart. Mara's fingers trembled as she read, understanding the depth of sorrow that had hardened him, the loneliness that no courtiers or riches could fill. And yet, as she read, she also felt hope. If Alaric could survive such grief, perhaps there was room for someone to enter his heart once more cautiously, carefully, without destroying what remained. The next morning, Mara found Alaric in the armory. The sunlight glinted off rows of swords and shields. He was polishing a long blade, his movements precise, almost ritualistic. "You have been in the library often," he said without looking up. "Did you find what you sought?" Mara held her composure. "I found stories of grief and courage. I think I understand why the castle feels as it does." Alaric finally looked at her, his dark eyes flickering with something between interest and caution. "Few can understand these walls. Fewer still understand the hearts within them. Perhaps you are different." Oh. Oh. For the first time, Mara saw a hint of vulnerability in him. It was fleeting, but it made her heart beat faster. She realized that the king, feared and distant, was also a man weighed down by loss, longing, and responsibility. And perhaps, just perhaps, he had never met anyone who could meet him on equal ground. As the days turned into a week, Mara's presence began to shift the rhythms of the castle. Courtiers noticed it, though they dared not speak openly. Alaric, too, began to change. His gaze softened when she entered a room. He lingered in conversations he might have dismissed before, and for the first time, he allowed himself small moments of amusement. Yet shadows remained both in the castle and within him. One evening, Mara found herself alone in the highest tower, staring at the moonlit sea. The wind tossed her hair, and she felt the weight of everything she had left behind, everything she might find here. A soft voice called her, name not human, not entirely, and she turned to see a shadow moving along the wall, twisting like smoke. "You are not what they say," the shadow whispered. "You are." Mara stepped back, her heart racing. Yet she did not flee. "Who are you?" she asked. Though part of her already knew the answer was not simple. The shadow lingered, almost curious, almost protective. "You will see soon enough. The castle has waited a long time for you." The next day, Alaric summoned her to the council room. He did not speak of shadows or whispers, only of strategy and responsibility. Yet Mara noticed the way his eyes lingered on her. The subtle attention he gave her words, the rare softness in his tone. "Your presence here changes things," he said finally. "You are not a visitor. You are a reminder of what can survive." In darkness, Mara felt warmth rise in her chest, mingled with fear. She understood the weight of his words. This was no ordinary friendship. Something deeper, more dangerous, stirred between them, unspoken yet undeniable. That night, Mara ventured into the hidden library again. The floating book had returned, its pages flickering as if impatient. As she opened it, words swirled around her, glowing faintly in the candlelight. They spoke of Alaric's family curse, a sorrow bound by generations of betrayal and grief. The book whispered that only a union born of courage, trust, and compassion could break the spell, and that the one who dared to embrace it would face tests beyond imagination. Mara's heart pounded. The whispers were no longer distant. They were urgent, insistent. She understood now that her presence was not accidental, that the castle had chosen her for a purpose, and that the man she had begun to understand, the king who had once seemed so unapproachable, depended on her in ways neither had yet realized. Meanwhile, Alaric stood on the battlements, unaware of Mara's discovery. He felt a strange pull toward her that he could not name. His heart, long shuttered against trust and love, stirred with something he had thought lost forever. He did not yet admit it to himself, but Mara was no punishment, no burden. She was a light in the shadows, a treasure in a kingdom built of grief. The night deepened. Shadows shifted and whispered through the castle, secrets pressing closer, magic stirring in anticipation. Mara and Alaric were connected now, by more than circumstance. Each step they took, each word spoken, wove a bond that neither could fully understand, yet neither could ignore. And as the candlelight flickered in Mara's hidden chamber, the book's glow casting strange, dancing patterns on the walls, she realized that the story of the widowed woman and the cursed king had only just begun. Destiny, whispered by shadows and written in the hearts of both, was moving forward. And the castle waited, patient and knowing, for the moment when courage and trust would meet in a single, fateful choice. The castle felt heavier than ever that morning. Shadows clung to the stone walls, as if anticipating something great. Mara stood at the threshold of the hidden chamber, the glowing book still faintly hovering before her. Its words had revealed the truth. The curse on King Alaric's family was ancient, born of betrayal, grief, and the refusal to trust again. And it would not end through power alone. It required courage, compassion, and a willingness to open one's heart fully. Mara knew she had to act. The path ahead would be dangerous, yet the thought of leaving the king to his shadows felt impossible. He was no longer just the distant, brooding monarch she had first met. He was a man broken by loss, a heart heavy with centuries of sorrow, and she could see glimpses of the boy he had once been innocent, hopeful, and longing for love. Alaric found her there, standing quietly in the chamber, the light from the book casting her silhouette in silver. His dark eyes softened at the sight of her. "You've seen the truth," he said, his voice a low rumble. "Do you understand what it asks of you?" Mara nodded, holding his gaze. "I do. It asks that we face it together, that we trust each other completely, even in the darkest moments." For a long moment, Alaric did not speak. The weight of the curse, of the family's long sorrow, pressed upon them both. Yet something in Mara's eyes, the steadiness, the courage ignited a warmth he thought he had lost forever. "Then, we face it," he said finally. "Together. Together." The castle shifted as they moved toward the heart of the curse. The air grew colder, heavier, and the shadows deepened, forming shapes that whispered old fears and old pain. Mara clutched Alaric's hand, feeling the steady strength beneath his fingers, and she knew that their bond would be the key to overcoming whatever lay ahead. The first trial came in the Hall of Mirrors. Each mirror reflected not their true forms, but their fears and regrets. Mara saw herself, abandoned by her family, judged for sorrow she could not control. Alaric saw his lost love, the betrayal of his trust, and the years of isolation that had hardened his heart. "You must not falter," Mara said softly, her voice echoing in the hall. "The shadows will try to divide us, but we are stronger together." Alaric nodded, his hand gripping hers tightly. The mirrors shifted, showing illusions of betrayal and fear. Yet together, they moved through the hall, their trust and unity breaking the power of the reflections. Each step forward was a step toward freedom, a step toward healing the wounds that had shaped them both. Next came the trial of shadows. The castle itself seemed alive, whispering secrets and fears, tempting them with visions of loss. Mara saw Alaric fall, alone and broken, while the shadows offered her safety if she abandoned him. Alaric saw Mara fall, lost and powerless, with the shadows offering him the throne if he left her behind. They faltered, briefly, hearts racing with doubt. But their hands met again, and in that touch, they found courage. "I will not leave you," Mara said, her voice unwavering. "Not for anything in this world." Alaric's eyes glimmered with emotion he could no longer deny. "Nor I you," he replied, his tone firm, yet tender. Together, they moved through the shadows, each step weakening the curse's hold, until the hall fell silent, and the darkness recoiled like a storm beaten back by the sun. Finally, they arrived at the chamber of the heart, the origin of the family curse. A single figure waited, shrouded in shadow, its form shifting and ancient. The whispers of the castle grew louder, almost urgent, as if the walls themselves leaned in to watch the final act. The shadow spoke, its voice echoing in the chamber, deep and timeless. Only one can bear the choice. One must give all they hold dear, trust without doubt, and offer their heart freely. Mara looked at Alaric, His eyes were filled with questions, yet also with faith. She understood immediately. This was not a choice of sacrifice alone, but of surrender. Surrender to trust, to love, and to the belief that even the deepest sorrow could be healed. "I will do it," she said, stepping forward. "For him." Alaric reached out, his hands trembling slightly, as if afraid she might vanish into the shadows. "We do this together," he said firmly. Together, they stepped into the center of the chamber. The shadow swirled around them, cold and oppressive, yet their hands remained joined. Mara closed her eyes and imagined the sorrow of the castle, the pain that had haunted Alaric's family for generations. She imagined it dissolving in the warmth of trust and love, the kind of bond that could heal even the oldest wounds. Alaric did the same. He focused not on fear, but on the quiet strength Mara had shown every day since she arrived. He allowed himself to feel hope again, a fragile, glowing ember that had lain dormant for far too long. The chamber shook as the shadows roared, trying to resist. Yet together, their bond became a light that cut through the darkness. The whispers of betrayal and grief faded, replaced by a silence that was profound and whole. The shadow's form trembled, then dissolved, leaving the chamber bathed in soft, golden light. Mara opened her eyes, and Alaric met her gaze. The weight that had burdened him for so long was lifted, the curse broken by courage, trust, and love. The castle itself seemed to sigh, as if relieved, and the halls glowed with a warmth that had been absent for centuries. They embraced, not out of desperation, but out of recognition, a recognition of what they had survived and what they had built together. Mara's head rested against Alaric's chest, and for the first time, both felt a peace that neither had known in years. Days passed, and the kingdom began to notice a change. The courtiers whispered, not of fear or darkness, but of hope and light. The castle gardens bloomed with a vibrancy never seen before, flowers glinting in colors that seemed to celebrate life itself. Mara walked beside Alaric, no longer a visitor or a punishment, but a partner, equal in courage, wisdom, and heart. Yet even in their joy, they remained mindful of the past. Mara never forgot the sorrow she had carried, nor the family who had cast her aside. Alaric never forgot the betrayal and grief that had hardened him. But together, they had forged something stronger, a bond that could survive shadows, curses, and the tests of the world. One evening, they walked the castle walls, hand in hand, the wind carrying the scent of the sea and the gardens below. The sky was a canvas of gold and crimson, the clouds painted with the promise of a new day. Mara looked at Alaric, and he, at her, and in that silence, they spoke volumes without words. "You are no longer a punishment," Alaric said softly. "You are everything I have longed for, though I never dared to dream it could exist." Mara smiled, a small, radiant expression that held all her journey, her grief, and her triumph. "And you," she replied, "are no longer the king of shadows. You are the man who can trust, who can love, and who can be loved in return." The wind whispered through the towers, as if the castle itself acknowledged their victory. And though the shadows of the past remained in memory, they no longer held power. Mara and Alaric had faced them together, and in doing so, had found redemption, hope, and a love that was more precious than any treasure in the kingdom. Yet in the farthest corners of the castle, a faint, almost imperceptible whisper lingered, a reminder that life was never without challenges, that shadows could return in different forms, and that the bond they had forged would always require care and courage. Mara felt it too, a quiet thrill of anticipation, knowing that together they could face whatever came next. As night fell and stars blinked over the cliffs, Mara rested her head against Alaric once more. The curse was broken. The shadows receded. And in their hearts, a new story began, one of trust, courage, and a love that had been worth every trial. The castle, alive with magic and history, seemed to hum a gentle song, celebrating the union of two souls who had dared to meet in darkness and emerge into light. Mara, once sent as punishment, had become the treasure the king had dreamed of, and Alaric, once bound by grief, had found the courage to love again. The wind carried their laughter through the towers and into the night. A sound brighter than any shadow, a promise that no curse, no sorrow, could ever truly conquer a heart united with another. And somewhere in the deepest shadow of the castle, the faintest shimmer remained a reminder that even in light, vigilance is wise, and that the next chapter of their journey had already begun.